Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Scott. I'm the Enterprise Editor of The Sun. I'd like to welcome you to our continuing series of debates featuring local candidates for state representative and for state senate. Tonight we have two women with us from Drake who are vying to become the state representative from the 36th Middlesex district, which includes Drake and Tewksbury. To my left, your right, I have the incumbent, who is Colleen Garry. She was first elected in 1994. Colleen, thanks for coming by and welcome. Tewksbury, what did I say?
Tewksbury.
Drake and Tewksbury. I'm sorry about that. And to my right, your left is Cathy Richardson. Cathy is a member of the Drake Board of Selectmen, and she's currently the chairman of that board, correct, Cathy? So thanks for coming in tonight. I appreciate it. We're going to go for about 55 minutes. I'm going to ask the candidates some questions. They'll have about a minute or so to respond to one another, and then from various times we'll kind of get off script and we'll allow the candidates to ask questions of one another and comment on each other's comments. So I'd like to begin. I've been starting with the incumbent, so Colleen, I'd like to begin with you.
Sure.
One thing about this race that I think is kind of neat is that you defeated Cathy's mother, Sheila, to get the post in 1994. I think in the primary that year you beat Warren Shaw,
right,
who was a Drake selectman at the time, right? And then in the general you met Sheila Richardson. How is this campaign different from the one in 1994 when you beat Sheila Richardson, and what are you doing differently?
Well, I think I also had Dick Lambros was the other gentleman in the primary that first time. I think that at that point I was the underdog, and I was the one person who had not served in elected office before. So there was a lot of getting out and introducing myself to people. This time seems to be, there's a lot more familiarity with my name, with my reputation, with my accomplishments and my voting record. So it's a little bit different, but I think that all in all, I take every race as if I'm behind, that I am the underdog, and I don't take anything for granted. So I'm doing everything that I need to do, knocking on doors and making phone calls and all the like. So I think that in some ways it's different because I was the ultimate underdog in that race, and this time people might say, oh, she's the incumbent, she's entrenched, she's been there a long time, but they also know my record of accomplishment, and I have a lot to be very proud of.
Okay. Cathy, what are you doing in this campaign to bring yourself out on top that your mom couldn't do back in 1994?
Well, I think certainly this race is very different, and firstly I just want to say thank you to you, Chris, for hosting this. Thank you to the Lowell Sun for letting us come in tonight to talk about these things. And you know, Colleen, it wasn't a race with my mom. I think this is a much different race. We certainly have social media that was not available to the folks who ran back in the early 90s. We also have a number of issues that maybe were not on the table back in the 90s, early 90s. But I also want to make it very clear that I am certainly my mother's daughter. She certainly inspired us politically when we were very young. I think the first time I held signs I was 10, so I've been doing this for a long time. But I am not my mom. I'm very much my own person, and I really want to run in this race on my own merit. I think I've worked very hard, both professionally, politically, and certainly for the folks in Drake and hopefully for the folks in Tyngsboro. So this is a much different race than back in 94.
Okay. Colleen talked about her record and her reputation. How would you assess her tenure in the State House since 1994?
Okay. Well, I think Colleen, you know, we've known each other a long, long time, and certainly Colleen is a very nice person. The reality is that the legislative process deserves a full-time person, and I think one of the criticisms I would have of Colleen's tenure is the fact that it has not been strictly a full-time position. We've had this conversation before that I really think the folks who are paying our salaries deserve full-time representation. One of the things that I think folks have talked to me about, certainly in the door-to-door campaigns, is their own frustration and sort of disillusionment with the government process, certainly at the state level as well as the federal level, because I really feel like the folks who have been there for a very long time sort of forget about some of the folks that they've been elected to serve. And they've been there a long, long time. And I think the biggest criticism I have is that I think 18 years is too long. I think there should be term limits. I think that's one of the terms, one of the phrases I've heard people talk about recently in some of the other debates. I know there's a lot of discussion about that. Someone had said a long time ago to me, Cathy, the term limit issue has been on the table many, many, many times. For some reason, it doesn't seem to take ground, and the reality is there's term limits in elections. But we all know people are busy, and I think there's some of that to be said.
Just sit tight for 1 second. I heard a lot of generalities there, but specifically, what has she not done over 18 years that you feel is reason enough to remove her? I mean, give me and the viewers some specifics on what she hasn't done.
Well, I think basically what the biggest concern that I have and the biggest concern that folks that I have spoken to have voiced to me is their feeling that she has not represented the folks as she initially said. So, certainly in Colleen, and we've talked about this before, that there's been some disillusionment with the fact that she had promised to be a full-time representative when she first took office, and then she is doing legal practice on top of the representative duties.
Colleen, you have a couple minutes to respond.
Sure.
Okay.
Certainly, I think that I've explained this, and obviously Ms. Richardson doesn't fully understand that I am a full-time representative. I did not practice law for the first 8 years out of my career. It was at that point that I decided to try to do a little bit of law. I was paying the law school loans at that point, and I also felt that it would be the best way of serving the community by seeing how the courts actually work, to be actually in those courts, to be able to see how the proposals and the laws that we were passing or not passing would actually affect people on a day-to-day basis. We do have term limits. It's at the polls every 2 years, and I've been very proud to say that this is my 10th election, and the people have put their trust in me, and I believe that I have fulfilled their trust, and I'm asking for their vote again on November 6th to send me to a 10th term. But I believe that I am a full-time representative. I don't know, Ms. Richardson said that people are driving by my law office and seeing my car. I hope she's not having people stalk me. But the fact of the matter is, sometimes I even carpool with my aides to make for a better environment. So I am a full-time representative. I practice. Sometimes I'm in at 7 o'clock in the morning to meet clients before they go to work, so they don't have to miss a day off, or I meet them at 7 o'clock at night, or I meet them on weekends. Everything is around my legislative duties. I have always worked while going to undergrad. I worked 30 to 40 hours a week. And when I went to law school, I worked 40 hours a week at the State House as well. So I'm not afraid of hard work. I have no other family obligations. I don't have a farm to run as well. So certainly this is my full-time job with the part-time law practice that benefits my district.
Colleen, when the legislature is in session, how much time do you think you actually devote to your legislative duties as opposed to your law practice?
When we're in session?
Yes.
Well, it really depends on what time of the year it is, whether we're in budget season or whether it's in say March or April when we're busy with hearings. So it really does depend. If you want to know, last year my profit on my law business was $782. That's how little I make on my law practice. It really is just supplemental to keep my hands in it and to be able to help my constituents see how it will happen. And from that, I've co-sponsored the shared parenting bill. I've been able to be active in the alimony reform legislation. A lot of the things that we take up, whether it's the Judiciary Committee or whether it's Ways and Means, any of those, I can look at and say, this is how it works in the real world.
Okay, thanks. Cathy, can you point to any conversations that you've had with constituents who've given you specific examples and they've said to you, hey, we've tried to reach Colleen Garry, but we can't reach her. She's not responding to telephone calls. Or are you relying mostly on sort of anecdotal information that's...
I can, in fact, recall several conversations, specific people saying they either did not get a response, or the response was, I vote my conscience, or I vote for what I feel is best. And I think those responses, just to most people, feel like our opinions are not as important as the sitting representative. So I don't feel I'm privy to say those kinds of, who said those things necessarily, but there are specific examples. The other...
Well, excuse me just for 1 minute. Well, without identifying the person with whom you spoke, could you please tell us what the issue was and where they felt that the current representative fell down?
Well, they got no response at all. I don't remember the exact issues, because there's been at least, I would say, 10 conversations I've had in that regard.
Colleen?
I'm very surprised at that. If anything, I think that Ms. Richardson is the one that's going against the will of the voters in her position as chairman of the Board of Selectmen. Town meeting voted specifically that they didn't want a deck on the boathouse, and yet she voted for reconsideration, and she's basically told us on Saturday she's going to vote for it, regardless of the fact that there was an attorney there representing the apartment complex and the people in the apartment complex and numerous people that were there. So certainly that is something that, I have never heard that I've been unresponsive or people may differ on what they believe. I represent everyone. I may not agree with, my mother didn't agree with everything I did, but I'm there to represent the community as a whole. And you know what, sometimes there is information when you sit and go through hours and hours of hearings that the average person doesn't receive. And like Ms. Richardson said, people are busy, and I sometimes have more information on the issues to make a more balanced approach. And I don't expect anyone to agree with me 100%, but I always do what's best.
Kathy, could you respond to the comment, Colleen's comment about the boathouse?
Absolutely.
You're referring to the boathouse bar, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, yeah, and we actually discussed this a little bit on Saturday. So this was something we did talk about on CAP. So one of the things I want to say, first and foremost, is that I really do think that I try to listen very hard to the residents and try to be very responsive to the residents as the chairman of the Board of Selectmen. There was an issue with this particular business, and last year at town meeting, they were hoping to put a deck on the back of their bar, which would have required a zoning change. The biggest outcry at that particular town meeting was revolving around the zoning change, which people did not want. We certainly did not approve it. People were very vocal about that. There was going to be music at the bar at all hours of the evening. The vote that Ms. Garry is talking about now is one that has come back. It's a separate, a new plan. And the owner has actually used some of the information she gleaned from the town meeting to make amendments and to change the plans that now the residents are not in opposition for. It's a totally different issue. It does not revolve around zoning bylaw changes. It's a completely different issue. I did say that we were going to vote on it when the legislation, when the attorney for the particular business owner is present. I did not say whether or not I was going to vote for or against it. I have not made up my mind. I'm waiting for that particular Board of Selectmen meeting to occur to do that.
Colleen, your response to that?
Well, I think it was interesting because she said no one was an objection to it. There was an attorney for the apartment complex, Lakeshore Apartments, and she was the one that asked for reconsideration after the fact. So, because she wanted to reconsider her vote against it. Why don't you tell people right now, out in the open, before the election, which way you're going to vote? There's been 2 selectmen's meetings since your reconsideration, and you haven't made a stand. You haven't made a stand on much of anything during this campaign, Ms. Richardson. And I think it's important the voters have that opportunity here.
There are 2 things to respond to there.
Sure, and the reconsideration we will take up at the Board of Selectmen meeting, so I don't feel that I need to say anything ahead of time. And the reconsideration was based on the parking issue, and I wanted to do a site visit. So those 2 things did happen, and my parking concerns have been satisfied. And in regards to not saying anything about issues, that's not true. This is the second of a public, 3 public forums that we're going to have to do these questions and have this debate. And my issues are on the Facebook page, and I've been talking about issues with constituents and residents since last February. At my events, people that have followed me and have talked to me know exactly where I stand on issues.
Let's just talk about those issues for a minute. As you approach this election now, it's less than a month away. What do you see as the top 3 issues affecting the residents of Drake and Tingsburg? That the boathouse bar issue, that's a sexy issue, but it's really not an issue, and in all due respect for a state representative. What are some of the major state issues that are at the forefront of your campaign that, Colleen, you can answer to?
Well, there's a couple of things. One certainly is the budget. We have a budget this year that grew $1.9 billion in the course of 1 year. Huge, huge budget. We've had a budget in 2007. Our budget actually was at the height of the recession. was actually 25.7 billion back in 2007. It's gone up to 32.3. That's a growth of 26% in 6 years. One of the votes that Mrs. Garry took as well was in regards to the supplemental budget. So last year we had not only an increase of 1.9 billion in the state budget, but we also had a $45 million supplemental budget that was also presented, and Representative Garry did in fact vote for that. And that was for, granted there was some money in there for Irene, and there was some money for the snowstorm. But most of it was stuff with items that I think would have been already in the regular budget. I would not have voted for the supplemental budget. I think some of the stuff, some of the items rather, that were in there were certainly things that would have been in the regular budget. We did not need a supplemental budget in addition.
Do you have one other issue? Yeah, I asked you for top 3 issues that are forefront to your campaign. It sounds like spending is one.
Spending is a huge one.
Okay.
Yeah, spending is a huge one. I think certainly if I was to be elected, I would join the Rule 28 Coalition. I want to be very clear about the fact that I do not intend to work succinctly for the Speaker of the House. We have 3 previous speakers, clearly, who have been in trouble, have been indicted. We have corruption at all levels in the State House and all the agencies that the State House oversees. Certainly we have probation issues, we have housing issues, we have a number of things that are going on, and I think the biggest issue that I see is really the corruption culture that exists on Beacon Hill, and we really need to change that. So certainly spending, the corruption issues on Beacon Hill, and finally the taxes. We need to keep the taxes competitive for our small businesses, to keep businesses right here in the state.
Colleen, I'd like you to respond first, though, to Cathy Richardson's comment about working for the Speaker, and then you can talk about 3 goals. Okay, so I have a little bit more than a minute.
You're talking about the boathouse being a sexy issue. Corruption seems to be the Republican big issue. I'd like to know what she's going to do to curb corruption. For some reason, Republicans like to throw out this word corruption without any kind of backing to it. I would suggest that, first and foremost, we did have ethics reform this year. As a matter of fact, I was one of the only Democrats to support a motion to discharge a Republican ethics proposal to the House floor. I have been one who, I don't care whether you're a Democrat or Republican, if it's good for my district, I will vote for my district. Matter of fact, my roll calls with the Speaker were only 84.5%. I'm one of the top 3 against the Speaker. And in fact, the Republicans, the lowest number of Republicans that voted against the minority leader was 95.7%. So certainly the Republicans keep much more in line with their leadership and their Republican causes than I do. The Rule 28 Coalition is a bogus political stunt. We have a rule that says that if a committee doesn't discharge, a certain number of members can vote to discharge a proposal. As I said, I wasn't afraid to go against the House leadership and to support a Republican proposal to discharge a Republican ethics proposal. So, the Rule 28, it's a bogus Republican gimmick. I do vote for my district. I would suggest that in that budgeting that Ms. Richardson will talk about, I am a member of the Ways and Means Committee, which is the Budget Committee, which is the most powerful committee of the House. I have served there for about 10 years now. I'm proud of that time. In the last 3 years, we have cut over $4 billion from the state budget out of what spending would have been. I guess she doesn't understand that if we take the services we have now and put it on to the next year, there is inflation rates that have to happen. So as that goes up and we have less money, we have to cut that money. We've consolidated. We've been very limited in one-time revenues used. We are the one of two states who have actually seen their bond rating, which is their credit rating, go up. We're at the highest level in the history of the Commonwealth. We're one of only 4 states to have over $1 billion in our rainy day fund. We are not bankrupt like some of the other states. We have been responsible through this worldwide recession, and I'm very proud of that. In fact, you know, we could talk about where the budget has gone, but the large percentage of increases have gone to local aid to fund education, police, and fire.
Okay, Colleen, thank you. Cathy, you mentioned that you signed on to the Rule 28 coalition.
Well, I would if I was elected.
You would if you were elected. Colleen called it a bogus political stunt. Your response to that?
I would disagree. I do think that one of the things that we need to be very clear about is that people work very hard. The Republican caucus is only 32 of us in the state house, and I would think that they would be very offended actually by that. You know, we take very seriously the rules of the state legislature, and we take very seriously the ability to bring bills to the floor that need to be looked at, and we don't want to necessarily wait for the speaker to give us a blessing to do so. And so the Rule 28 coalition was really basically based on the fact that we wanted to remind folks in the state legislature that we can, as a group of 81 members, bring a bill out of committee and not wait for it to go typically there to die, which is usually what happens to bills when they end up in committee or for study.
Okay. You talked earlier about changing the corruption, the culture of political corruption on Beacon Hill. It's well known that the 3 previous speakers have all been indicted by the federal government. But how does a freshman representative, particularly in the minority party, attack such a big issue and get change?
Well, that's a good question, and I think really by virtue of the fact that I'm going in new, I don't have any allegiances per se. I don't have any history with anyone. I certainly do not owe anyone anything by getting in there, except for the very fact that I am there to represent the people of Drake and Tingsboro. And so, you know, I do think that's part of the reason why it's good to change hands. I don't think people should be in those positions for any longer than 8 or 10 years. I think that's 18 years, again, is just much too long. And, you know, Colleen certainly is not the only one that has that history at the State House. There are many, many people there that have been there a very long time. And I think what happens is, you know, human nature. You know, I'm a social worker, mental health, substance abuse counselor by profession. And we all know, and I can certainly tell you after 30 years of doing that work, that, you know, human nature is such that we want to feel good. And I said this, you know, in CAP, we want to feel good about who we are. We want to feel like we're making a difference. I don't think people are maliciously and innately bad. But the reality is that once you're in a position for that length of time, it tends to shift. The focus tends to shift from the people that got you to the place, got you into the office in the first place, to more about you and what you can do personally.
Okay, but do you have a bill, you know, that you've already drafted in your head that you would file if you were elected that somehow addresses this culture of corruption that you refer to? Again, you're speaking in generalities, and I'm just looking for some specifics.
Right. No, and I appreciate that, but I don't think this is something that can be done with a bill specifically. What I think certainly we need to do is look at the ethics issues that are present. We have certain things like we have Representative Marzilli who, you know, committed a crime and is somehow offended that he does not get the enhanced pension. Most of the people in the private sector get fired. When you commit a crime and you're working in the private sector, most of the time your bosses don't keep you around. You usually leave. And for someone who's a sitting representative to be somewhat offended by the fact that he does not get an enhanced pension, which is something that people who run and lose an election or do not get their incumbents who lose an election or do not get the party's nomination are entrusted to an enhanced pension. That does not happen in the private sector, ever.
Colleen, you talked earlier about pension reform.
Right.
I think Cathy Richardson certainly has hit a chord there with the Jim Marzilli case, which the public I think is pretty familiar with. Can you talk about that a little bit, and how is it that he was allowed to keep his pension? And that decision just came down a couple of weeks ago.
Actually,
how could that not get
unfortunately, again, Ms. Richardson doesn't do her homework. Fact of the matter is, pension reform and ethics reform has happened in the last 2 years. Senator Marzilli is no longer an elected member. He is a former senator, and it was up to the courts to decide whether he had a pension or not. So he did go to jail. He did serve his time, and I'm not going to defend what happened, but we have changed the rules. You can no longer get the enhanced pension if you're not re-elected. So there is more to that. Pension reform has been done, and ethics reform has been done. So, you know, you can bring up these other proposals, but it's already changed. The fact of the matter is you have no proposal for changing the so-called corruption. And I take offense when you continue to say let's retire Colleen Garry and end corruption on Beacon Hill. That is defamatory. Can you show me one time when I've been corrupt? And one time when it's been about me? It hasn't. I lost my chairmanship. I lost the extra pay that went with my chairmanship because I was voting against the speaker, because I was voting with my district.
On which issue, Colleen?
On every. I had 33 vote calls last year that I voted for the Republicans against the leadership, including one was a major one, was that ethics reform that the Republicans wanted discharged. I have rolled back taxes with the Republicans. I have co-sponsored legislation like Melissa's law from day one with the Republicans. It has never been about me. It has been about my district. And I don't think you can point to one time, and I think corruption should be off the list of discussions.
Could you respond, Cathy? And I've been pushing you for specifics, and in all due respect, we haven't heard a lot of specifics. Try to be specific on what Colleen just said.
Well, I think, certainly there's been the issues with the housing authority that's come up, and certainly Drake is very concerned about that. The seniors were very happy with Mrs. Carabassis, and we all know that has become an issue that's been in the papers.
As recently as yesterday.
Correct. And again, Colleen, you're getting defensive about something that I personally never said. So what I'm saying is the culture of corruption is bred, I think, by the fact that folks are in offices too long, and there gets to be a long list of political favors that happens on Beacon Hill, and that's part of the nature of that particular place. So what I'm saying is that certainly the Drake Housing Authority is an issue. The Drake housing issues have been problematic for the seniors. We have certainly a position where you, again, brought a recommendation to the governor. The governor and the lieutenant governors primarily look to the state senators and state representatives for those recommendations, those appointments. And you brought somebody to the governor for an appointment who then became, obviously a problem for the seniors at the Drake Housing Authority. They were very upset. They, to some degree, are expecting an apology from the ones that I talked to about that kind of an appointment. And so I really feel like that particular process, by bringing someone that has, to the Housing Authority, that has caused the board to be sort of in a position where the seniors are very, very upset, to the point where they're picketing in front of the Council on Aging. I think you need to take some responsibility for that as well. I don't think that you are by nature an unethical person, Colleen. But I think the nature of the place, the nature of the State House, when people are there too long, things begin to happen that shouldn't, and they negatively affect the residents and the citizens.
Well, I was going to bring up the Housing Authority issue. I mean, how could I not? But Cathy beat me to it. So, Colleen, please respond to that.
I absolutely think it's so ironic. Ms. Richardson would bring up the Housing Authority, because we did have the article yesterday in which the Republican talking head talked about the corrupt men in John Zimney, Ken Martin, and Brian Bond. Those three men have worked tirelessly on behalf of the town of Drake and the citizens of the town of Drake, whether it be in building the parks, whether it being 25 years on the Housing Authority, whether it be on everything that has been involved in this community. Corruption, as far as I'm concerned, and the way I look it up in the definition, is that you do something for monetary or personal gain. I don't know anywhere that these three men have had any personal gain from anything. And the most ironic part was the September 20th, 2011 Ed Hannon story in the Lowell Sun. May I quote the state Republican committee woman, Sheila Richardson, a former Housing Authority appointment by the governor, who said the board is handling the process correctly, albeit not in a popular manner. The process is put in place was legal. If the director's contract is up for review, we have a board put in place to vote to renew it. I see nothing wrong with the process accomplished. You may not get one person to apply for the job. Maybe you will get someone who is better. So maybe the Republican spokesperson should have listened to someone who's been involved in the Housing Authority, who has been a governor's appointment, who has served on that board, and who is a state committee woman for the Republican Party. She saw nothing wrong with it. She was there. She supported what happened. And I think, I'm not saying that Ms. Richardson has anything to do with her mother's stance on things, but she obviously didn't think anything happened that was corrupt. And I think that the Republican Party owes those three men an apology.
Colleen, Cathy, I'm sorry.
Well, I disagree. I think the seniors that I've spoken to were very distraught about the fact that that whole process occurred. Again, to the extent that they were picketing in front of the Council on Aging. And so, you're right, my mom is certainly her own person and has her own opinions. I feel the appointment was made in a way that was detrimental to the seniors in Drake.
But was it corrupt? Was it illegal?
I didn't say it was corrupt. I didn't
Well,
say
when
either
the
one.
discussion was about corruption, and you brought up the housing authority, didn't you?
I did. I
Yes.
brought up the appointment, and I didn't say it was corrupt. I said those are
The
those.
question was about corruption, and you brought that up as evidence.
Do you feel how that was handled, Cathy, had an air of corruption in it?
Well, it's certainly, people have watched the Mike McLaughlin story, and there certainly are places where people tend to connect the dots. Now, I am not saying, in fact, that Colleen is at all a process in that, is a part of that process at all. She's getting very defensive on something that I did not say.
There was an inference, though, that we were talking about corruption, and you raised the Drake and Housing Authority issue in the story that was in the Sun yesterday. So are you trying to connect the dots?
It's very clear that Colleen has known Mr. McLaughlin. I do not know Mr. McLaughlin. Colleen certainly does. I don't know, how much he knows of Mr. Bond. And I certainly think that we need to be very careful when we're recommending things to the governor, lieutenant governor. And so I do think the Housing Authority was, again, one of these examples of where the residents were very, very upset and distraught by the appointment that was made.
Colleen, in reference to the story that was in the newspaper yesterday,
Yes.
let's just not talk about the personalities for a minute. Let's just talk about the process. You've been a state rep now since 1994,
Right.
and you have completed numerous campaign finance reports.
Right.
So you know the rules,
Right.
you know how it's done.
Right.
So how was it that most recent campaign finance report, where you're required by law to list the donations and specifically who gave them to you, how was it that this one was done in error and you did not list specifically the donations from Bond, Zimini, and Ken Martin as referenced in the Sun story? And because that's what raised the red flags, that
Right.
you were obviously trying to hide those donations.
Right.
And you were caught. So can you please respond to that, and Cathy can talk about that for a minute.
Sure. As a matter of fact, I had left the paperwork up in Maine, and I didn't have the list, but I had the deposit slip, so I used that amount and I put that in. So the total amount of money was accurate. I didn't have the sheets in front of me, and as soon as I realized it, I was able to go to Maine and get the actual sheets. We updated it right away, and if I was trying to hide it, why would I have even listed it then? I think it is ironic, again, that the Republican committee would bring up campaign finance reports because there's several things on Ms. Richardson's reports that are of interest. The fact of the matter is that she had a public employee as her treasurer for 2 years on her selectman race, which is illegal. And it seems that maybe she can answer it whether she has 2 accounts right now because the numbers don't add up. And I'd also like to know, as a sitting member of the Board of Selectmen, being the licensing agent for the town of Drake for liquor licenses, how she is able to run a $1,000 bill at a business that she regulates their license.
Which business is that?
That would be Lindsay's.
Okay.
It's been 2 years that she's had a $1,000 liability at Lindsay's.
Cathy, how long have you been at Drake and Sullivan?
Just under 3 years.
Oh, just under 3 years, okay. So how do you respond to Congress's charges there?
Well, the reality is that in the selectman race, which again is a very different race than the state rep race, we did have a different bank and we switched banks in the state rep race. Then in terms of the information regarding the treasurer, I was learning. It was my first race. We certainly had to learn from that. And what we did was we changed treasurers. We took advantage of the Office of Campaign and Political Finance workshops. We attended those and remedied that situation when it was brought to our attention. The other piece is that we do have some outstanding liabilities. The selectman race was a very grassroots effort. There was a very small committee that was put together for selectman race. And what happened was that I used a lot of my own funding. And so those liabilities have been taken care of. So
do you owe Lindsay's currently $1,000, as Colleen is alleging?
That's not correct.
It's not on any report. When did you pay it, I wonder? And do you have two accounts? Because this one's Bank of America, and this one's Washington Savings Bank. This one ends with 2618, and this one starts with 0.
It's been transferred into that one. I would have to look at all the paperwork, but the accurate account is Washington.
Okay. So the liability of 1,000, when was it paid?
It's been paid since. So I would have, again, I don't have the paperwork on me. I have to
Well,
look.
it ends January 20th, 2012, and this starts January 1st, 2012.
But here's the pertinent question on Lindsay's, whether the bill has been paid or not, but have you taken any recent action, any votes as a member of the Board of Selectmen to renew the license or anything like that?
Lindsay's?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
You didn't vote to renew the license in December. Did you abstain? Is it recorded that you abstained?
In December of
Last year.
11?
Yeah.
I would have to look. I don't remember that coming up, truthfully.
Okay. You know, I'd like to just get back to the Drake Housing Authority issue for a minute and the campaign finance report. Cathy, do you think that Colleen not listing those donors, what she was trying to hide, who was giving her money to her campaign?
I have no idea. She would have to answer that. I don't know.
Okay. Colleen, you said you weren't.
No.
Right. All right. So, Colleen, this is your opportunity now to ask a question of your opponent.
I guess, we really don't know where she stands on much of anything. The death penalty, healthcare finance, CPA expansion, bottle bill, we know nothing. So if she can answer those, that'd be great.
Cathy?
Okay. Well, in terms of the health law, I would not have voted for the healthcare bill. The healthcare bill that was brought before the House was in fact 349 pages long and was brought to the House for a vote not even 24 hours before it needed to be voted on. There were 5 amendments that were discussed, and the reality is it impacts 18% of the businesses in the state. I would not have voted for that bill. And to me, it's exemplary of the fact that there's a lot of legislation that gets passed the last few days of the session, last session, and it seems to be a rush, that there seems to be a lot of bills that get passed that last day, and it seems to be part of the culture, again, part of the culture of the Hill, that things get brought and everything rushes that last day of session. I don't think that's fair to the residents. I don't think it's fair to the citizens of Drake and Jamesboro to have that kind of legislation rush through.
And Colleen, I think you had a couple of other issues there.
The death penalty, CPA expansion.
Are you going to answer those as well?
No.
Sure.
Okay.
I have a record.
All right. Well, in terms of the death penalty, certainly that was one of the issues that people in Drake are most remember most clearly about Ms. Garry, that said she would support it, and then in fact did not. And the reality is I do support the death penalty for those folks where it's very clear that they were killing our police officers and people in public safety, for sure. Certainly the technology has gotten better, and the issues with DNA testing and that sort of thing have gotten better. Certainly the drug lab issues are going to cloud that, and that again is unfortunate, but I am in favor of the death penalty when the case is very, very clear.
And CPA?
In CPA. I was not in favor of the fact that we are going to use money for projects that were not initially built with CPA funding. That expansion I don't think is good.
Colleen, what about Cathy's comment about your flip-flop on the...
In regards to the death penalty, and I originally, I don't discriminate between a life of a public safety individual or their mother. I think a life is a life. I did initially support the death penalty. I served many years on the Criminal Justice Committee. I was actually vice chair of the Criminal Justice Committee. I would say probably over 100 hours of hearing testimony in that matter. The fact of the matter is that $2 million, it costs $2 million for every person we try to execute. With all of the safeguards in the legal system, it costs us $2 million for each one. On average, there are 36 people who are eligible for the death penalty every year. That would be $78 million to try to execute 36 people. As chair of the county's committee, I was able to go around and see some of the prisons and to see the secured isolation areas and to see what they have to deal with coming out for 1 hour a day by themselves in isolation and go back in. And to hear these people saying that they wish that they were executed I think it's more of a penalty to keep them in there for life. It costs us less to keep them in there for life than it does to try to execute one person. And again, it just shows us with what happened with the labs that there are human beings involved in all of these cases, and errors do happen. And you know, I would rather see, and this is a gentleman whose father was killed in New York. He was a constituent from Cambridge that came in to testify. His father was a Congressman Lowenstein out of New York, and he said, paranoid schizophrenic walked into my father's office and shot him dead. I would rather we spend the money on proposals and projects, and I would think Mrs. Richardson would be supportive as a social worker to get these people help rather than trying to execute them after the fact. So I would rather see programs preventing the murders in the first place, whether it's drug addiction or mental health, prevent it from happening in the first place than to spend all this money on trying to execute.
Quick response?
Well, I think it would be nice if we could fix everyone. There are people certainly that are not amenable to, you know, the solutions that are out there. And it's interesting because the mental health and substance abuse fields tend to be what gets decimated when the budget cuts come through. Certainly the DDS, which is the Department of Disability, folks with disabilities, mental retardation, that sort of thing. 10 million was cut to DDS respite, and 7.5 million was cut in adult day rehab in that particular department. And the problem with that is that we all know that the caretakers of those particular individuals need a break. That is a very, very difficult scenario for folks who are in that position.
I'd like to just try to hit a few quick issues here because we've already gone 45 minutes. You said earlier you'd be in favor of term limits?
Absolutely.
Okay, so if you're elected, how many terms will you serve?
I would do 4 at the most, 8 years.
You sure? That's what Marty Meehan said.
Is that what he said? I would do 4.
Okay. Colleen?
Obviously, I'm not in favor of term limits. I think experience does count. If somebody's going to go have surgery, I'd rather have somebody who has 18 years experience rather than have somebody that just got out of medical school. I think that this is not a popularity contest. This is about important issues, and experience does matter.
On the ballot questions, ladies. Medical marijuana.
Absolutely not.
Just briefly explain why?
Medical, well, it's hard to do it briefly.
Yeah, you can do it.
Briefly, medical marijuana, I just think it is, there is no medical evidence that the pill form of THC is not in and of itself sufficient. We have a number of pain management techniques now. Medical marijuana is not proven by the Medical Association to be at all effective.
I agree. Unfortunately,
My goodness, you guys agree?
Unfortunately, you know, I would love to be able to help some of those folks with glaucoma who say that it helps them save their eyesight and so forth with pain in cancer patients. But at this point, we don't have enough evidence.
Okay. Assisted suicide.
I would not be in favor of that. Because primarily, I think there's a lot of room for issues with elder abuse in that regard. The legislation is fairly loose in some respects, and so I would not be in favor of this particular ballot initiative.
Colleen?
I agree. I served on the End of Life Commission several years ago, and we really looked into it, and that we should be looking more to a palliative care and making sure that people aren't in pain at the end of their life. That to let them live with dignity, pain-free, is the most important thing. I think that the idea that there aren't a lot of psychological background on these people, as long as there's a 6-month window of when they could die, which is, you know, anybody who's a doctor knows that you can't tell specifically that it's going to be within 6 months. To have those pills out there would be dangerous, and certainly I don't agree with it.
Okay. Colleen, would you be willing to draft and sponsor legislation, being a representative of 2 border communities, you know, just south of major commercial areas in New Hampshire, Nashua and Salem, New Hampshire, that would give merchants that straddle the state line or that are on the state line some kind of relief from the sales tax to make them more competitive against the businesses across the border?
Absolutely. You know, it's been something that has been discussed for a long time, 10-mile border radius and so forth. I actually have a letter in there of support from the food industry for all the work that I've done, whether it be on the bottle bill revision to expanding recycling, or whether it be the item pricing, all the different regulations that bear down on the border communities and my support for them. So certainly I would be willing to sponsor it. I don't know how far, because it's all a numbers game when you deal with it.
I was just going to say, how far, what do you think would be a compromise?
Well, anybody, we've talked about in the past with a 10-mile radius, and then that person who has a district and 11 miles away says, wait a minute, that's not fair. So it really is a number, and we really are the only ones that are affected on the New Hampshire board. Everyone else is higher than us. So certainly it would be hard to get past. But I did, from the very beginning of the governor's release of his budget, I got all the Greater Lowell reps and some of the Methuen reps to sign on to a letter against expansion of the sales tax onto candy and soda, increase of the cigarette sales tax, and we were able to defeat that in the House.
Okay, Cathy?
I would love to see the sales tax go back down to 5%. I mean, the income tax rather. So the income and the sales go back down to 5%. Representative Lyons has put together a platform where we all feel that we certainly could bring sales income and the meals tax back down to 5%. In 2009, the sales and the meals were brought from 5 to 6.25, and back in 2000 we asked for 5% income taxes on the ballot, and that was brought up to 6.25. And it's interesting because in some degrees we revisited the same scenario back when when Governor Dukakis was available, and he had said if we don't increase taxes, Armageddon is going to happen, and there's going to be just craziness in the streets. And then he raised everything. He raised it up to 6.25, and then Governor Wall came in and reversed those. And Armageddon, in fact, did not happen, and we all learned to live within our budgets. And that's a part of the process with this supplemental budget that I think is really discouraging. That we set a budget, and then at the end of the year, we're still a $45 million short. We have the MBTA that can't find $101 million in fares they can't account for. We have, again, people that are offended that they don't get enhanced pensions when they commit a crime. I think the average citizen is just so dismayed by the fact that it just seems like the legislative experience creates situations where the legislatures feel that somehow they are above the law. And again, Colleen, I'm not saying you specifically. I said, but I do think there is a reason why people need to vote in new folks, that people need to be replaced. People do not need to be career politicians. That's not what the Constitution of this country and of this state is founded on.
Colleen, do you consider yourself a career politician?
I consider myself a career public servant. I have always been serving the community. Right after college, I became president of the Jacob Scholarship Foundation. I've been involved with the Lions and the Lioness Club, with the Rotary. I've been involved with just recently helping to raise money for the Performing Arts Program in Drake. I learned from my parents to serve the community, to serve the district. And I am proud of that. I am proud that I've been able to continue to serve. And that's what I think. I'm not a politician. I consider myself a public servant, having spent 8 years as a legislative aide, listening to people's concerns, and now as 18 years as a state representative, listening to concerns and responding to them. That's what I consider.
Thank you. Cathy, forgive me, but did I give you an opportunity to ask one question of Colleen? I'm not sure I came back to that.
I don't think so.
Because I think we're going kind of quickly back and forth.
Yeah.
So before the night is over, you have that opportunity, and I apologize. I'm glad I have my notes.
No problem.
Yeah.
In terms of the Pacheco law and prevailing wage, Colleen, there are issues with those. People are very concerned. There's been a lot of conversations about repealing the prevailing wage law. There's been a lot of conversation about trying to undo Pacheco law, which clearly puts independent contractors at a disadvantage. What's your feeling about those?
Well, I believe that there is importance in having a basis for what a wage should be. Under the Republican proposals, they have it that we even eliminate children's minimum wage, and that just goes to child labor as far as I'm concerned. I think that we should be sure that we're getting the best bang for the buck, and if somebody can show me that the Pacheco law is costing us more money for no benefit, I'd be glad to look at it.
Okay, that's good. I just think those are important. Our jobless rate is sky high. It's much higher than the unemployment rate, as we know. I spoke to someone just as recently as in June, and when she was getting her unemployment, they were talking about 1,600 people coming off unemployment every week. Now, those people don't get included into the unemployment numbers because then they're out of benefits. And we all know people in this economy who have been out of jobs for a number of years at this point and do not count towards the unemployment rolls. The jobless numbers are, I think at this point they're estimating around 14.2. Last time I looked, or 14.5%, which is very, very, very high. And clearly the one-party system in this state is not working. It's not working well. And we've seen what's happened in Rhode Island and California in one-party states where their cities are now filing for bankruptcy. And so I really feel like whatever has been tried is not working well. I mean, clearly the economy is not recovering the way we expected. There's a lot of drag on the economy. Granted, some of it has to do with global economy in terms of Europe and Asia. But clearly what's happening right now is not working well for the folks in Drake and Tingsboro.
Again, your opponent's been very critical of the state legislature. Your quick response to that?
As a matter of fact, we've added 31,000 jobs this year. We've gone from a 7.4 rate to 6.3. 24 months ago it was 8.2. We're almost 2% lower than the national average. We have been growing jobs. We are in a recovery. We're leading the nation in our recovery. We have, as I said, the bond rating is the highest that it's ever been. Our rainy day fund is over $1 billion. We are investing. Our state business climate, according to the Tax Foundation, is number 22 overall. We're only second to New Hampshire in all of New England. We have rolled back the taxes. Personal income has gone from 5.3 to 5.25. Corporate taxes have gone from 8.25 to 8%. Financial institution tax has gone from 10.5 to 9. We have the health care bill that you would have voted against. We have actually gone from one of the highest cost health care to average, and within 5 years with the cost containment bill we did, we will be one of the lowest in the nation. And we're able to provide health care for everyone. 99% of all children are covered by health insurance. You may not agree with the moratorium on the mandates. I wonder if you agree with the health care moratoriums.
Well,
Quick response, and we're going to wrap it up.
sure.
Please.
The moratoriums, I'm less concerned about those. I'm more concerned about the global wording of the bill, which creates 2 new state agencies. So now we have 2 new state agencies that are going to be watchdogs for this healthcare implementation. And so that, to me, just again just reflects this sort of the need of the legislature to create places where we have to spend money. And all the information that I've received, primarily from the hospitals end of things, they're not happy about this. This is going to really drive it's going to prevent some of the smaller hospitals that perhaps we're going to be going under to not be acquired by some of the larger hospitals. There's this is really basically an excise tax on top of what's already happening. There's an excise tax on existing services. And so, I do think, again, there was 349 pages that was voted on in less than 24 hours.
Okay, ladies, we've reached 5 minutes to 6, so I'm going to give you each an opportunity for a 2-minute closing statement.
Okay.
Kathy, we'll start with you.
All right. Okay. Well, again, Chris, thank you so
you're
much,
welcome.
and thank you to Lowell Sun, and this certainly was spirited. And again, Colleen, thank you for being here. And so I'm in this race because clearly spending, taxes, and overregulation by state government are killing jobs and hurting families. We all know people who are out of work. We all know people that are in trouble, that are trying to hold on to their homes and are trying to decide what to buy in terms of gas and food. I'm no stranger to hard work. As Colleen referenced, I live on a working livestock farm that's been in my family for 6 generations. As a social worker and a mental health and substance abuse counselor for many, many years, I'm well aware of the challenges that families experience here in Drake and Tingsboro. As chairman of the Drake Board of Selectmen, I've worked to make a difference for the folks in Drake, and I hope to make a difference for the folks in Tingsboro as well. And as a mother and grandmother, I care about our children. I want them to have a safe and healthy future, and I want to do something about it. In talking to friends and neighbors, it's very clear we have common concerns. We all need jobs that pay well. We all need to have a bright and safe future for our kids, and we want to make sure our seniors have what they need to do well, to get the services that they deserve and that they pay for. And in order to do that, I will work full-time as your state representative, controlling spending and taxes, trying to get rid of as many job-killing regulations as we can to stop public assistance fraud and to support law enforcement and public safety. We need strong, experienced leadership to deal with the very challenging problems we're all facing in state government, and I offer you that kind of leadership. It won't be easy to turn this around, but we certainly can, and we can get started right here and today in Drake and Tingsboro. I hope you vote on November 6th. Thank you.
Thank you, Cathy. Good luck. Colleen.
Thank you. I love Massachusetts, and I love the towns of Drake and Tingsboro. It is my honor and privilege to have served you for the last 18 years. I am a full-time state representative. I happen to have a part-time law practice. I work around all of my requirements as a legislator, and it makes me a better legislator to see what's going on day to day in the courts. I think it's important to note that this Commonwealth of Massachusetts is going in the right direction. Have we gotten to complete recovery? No. We have a lot more work to do, but we are on the right track. We have passed 3 balanced budgets in the last 3 years with over $1 billion in a structural deficit. We've done that, we balanced it with no new taxes, which actually rolling back taxes, while still funding local aid to secure our education and public safety in our local communities. We have passed EBT welfare reform. We have passed ethics reform. We have passed the Melissa's Law to make all the communities safer from violent habitual offenders. We have passed transportation reform. We are providing for our local communities. $28.1 million has gone into the Tingsboro Bridge area. We have completed the road work on widening Route 3. We have worked on Lakeview Avenue and Drake. All of that will help with economic development. The most important thing is that we have retained jobs, we're creating new jobs, we've created a new job development association between the vocational schools, the one-stop career centers, and the community colleges. It's important that we have done all these things in these tough times. We're getting there, we're in the right direction, and I respectfully ask for your vote on November 6th. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen, and good luck in your
Thank you.
re-election
Thanks.
bid. Thank you, everyone, for watching this evening. My colleague, Jim Campanini, will be back tomorrow evening on Tuesday at 5 p.m. for a debate between state Senate candidates Sandy Martinez of Chelmsford and Michael Barrett of Lexington. That's 5 o'clock tomorrow at moralsun.com. Thank you and have a good evening.